Why are Chelsea fans turning on the ownership? Is this fair, unfair? What does it say about modern football and the club? We're going to get into all of that today. Hello there guys, welcome back to Let's Talk Chelsea. I'm Daniel Charles. I hope you're doing really well on this Thursday. It's been a difficult start to the international break for Chelsea Football Club. Earlier in the week, we were speaking about Raheem Sterling, Boogate, the reaction to that and what followed. And now we've got this bombshell Chelsea Supporters Trust statement and open letter that was released last night with a response from the club, and that in itself has sparked a lot of media attention, interviews and clips that we're going to get into in today's show, and then of course I will give you my reaction.
Chelsea Supporters Trust say that fans have significant concerns about the club's future. They've written a lengthy letter to co-owners Todd Boehly and Begdad Eghbali.
The issue that a lot of supporters that we speak to and come and talk to me is just the lack of vision that's being shared, the lack of communication, the lack of understanding and the real lack of trust between the board and the fans.
I don't think it's that surprising that we have reached this stage, and I guess, of course, I am very biased in this. Not only am I an affiliate member of the Supporters Trust, so I'm involved in that, but then also I am a Chelsea fan who's very, connected, like a lot of you, within the ongoings of the club. So for me, this kind of sentiment, their conclusion, what they had to say about the current situation is not that shocking. I think it's a quite accurate reflection, not just on people who go to Stamford Bridge and to away games regularly. It's kind of a general sentiment people have about the club currently. And I don't think the Supporters Trust can be accused of being hyperbolic, of being reactionary, of just trying to grab headlines. They are reflecting what their members tell them. They are reflecting what supporters they speak to on a regular basis tell them. They are reflecting that even with communication they have with the club pretty regularly. This is not the act of some kind of wild outburst just to gain clicks. It's actually saying to the club, there is a chance for communication here. You are not taking it. If you continue to ignore it, we see things like this. And for those listening on my podcast, I've put up the stickergate we've now got of basically the owners portrayed as clowns. Now, I don't think that's a positive outcome. I don't think this sort of thing is going to lead to much change. I don't think abusing the players is going to lead to much change. But there comes a point where fans, and even, Dom admits this in the interview with Sky, there comes a point where there's not much a supporters trust who are going to try and be diplomatic obviously can do. And you aren't going to be able to control everyone with what they do with their actions and the way they show that frustration.
I think some may have looked at our letter and just looked at the top line, but what we really were saying within our letter, and we've always tried to be positive with the club, whilst we reserve the right to criticise. We've actually worked closely with the club, and a lot of the things that they do are really great. But the bottom line is that we're deeply worried about the situation. We don't like to see the club in this state. And we've said to them that they need to be more upfront and honest and transparent with fans. Chelsea fans are not stupid. They're aware that there are problems going on in the club, but come out, speak to the fans. They don't bite, and if they do, their bark's a lot bigger than their bite.
The fans are looking at the club and they've seen the amount spent, the lack of transparency with what this grand project vision is, that is communicated to them very secondhand, consistently through preferred media outlets, through comments given at behind closed doors events, on business conferences that are not speaking directly to fans. And as Dom rightly mentions, as I'm sure you've seen, we've seen Jim Ratcliffe go into Manchester United and give very direct quotes, sure, to media outlets, but it feels a lot more open and transparent to Man United fans who have rightly been frustrated with their current ownership over the past 20 years than we have seen from Chelsea's ownership, who give these grand proclamations over recent years about their vision of being pioneers in fan engagement, of them improving the sporting side, which, according to Begdad Eghbali, was not terribly well managed. That's where the quote and the conclusion of Chelsea being a laughingstock has come from. It doesn't come from nowhere. They see what has been spent. They see the lack of output on the pitch. And it's not I don't think this is trying to turn everyone at Chelsea on the players. It's actually looking at who's responsible. It's not looking directly at one head coach. It's not looking directly at one player. It's looking at how have we got to this situation? Who are the people responsible? And how can we try and resolve this situation to make it healthier? That's more productive than us all just sitting here and going Poch in, Poch out, Sterling in, Sterling out, and going on these sort of stupid culture war things that we have in recent years online between Chelsea fans that actually gets us nowhere and actually doesn't hold the people responsible accountable.
You've also mentioned in the open letter numerous price increases to tickets and travel since the takeover, which you claim has broken the owner's promise of putting the fans at the forefront. Have you got concerns that that will continue as a trend?
Yeah, when we first met with the owners and the former president of business said openly to supporters that they were going to look to maximize commercial revenue before looking at how they can maximize revenue from match day. And we're really frustrated as a trust that this pledge has been broken. As you say, coach subsidy, which a lot of supporters really relied on, has been withdrawn entirely. So an entire reduction there. And it's small things like the cost of programs, the cost of going to youth games, the cost of attending women's games, food, drink, shirts. And whilst these are small increases, they all have a huge impact on the pockets of loyal Chelsea fans.
I also think there is a part of this that is broader than just Chelsea, that, again, anecdotally, I feel myself, but I know from other people I speak to who feel it as well. It's not just about solely about the results and the performances and what players are playing well, what players are not playing well. There is a growing feeling that despite the quality of the game in a technical sense has never been higher, the distance in elite football to their communities has never been wider. And that is felt absolutely at the elite level. And you see ticket prices going up. You see the price of watching football, watching your club throughout a season with these growing subscriptions that continue to stack up each year, and the price of those don't seem to be going down anytime soon. Then they see broadcasters having ridiculous power to change the fixtures, to change the dates and times of fixtures very late on, which has screwed over match-going fans, especially away fans, a number of times, not just Chelsea, across the league. They see all of that. They see the culmination of that. They see CEOs like Chris Jurasek make comments that fans are actually just customers. And that's why people feel a disconnect. Now, I do think it's fair to point out that is everything terrible with Chelsea? No. Is there nothing good to take from the current season? No, that's obviously binary. That's not going to be productive. That doesn't mean that things can't improve. But then we don't have to go that there is no criticism to be had and this criticism is invalid. And I do think with them being transparent, sure, there are some fans, and I accept this, that there is a responsibility within us to maybe have a better discourse, to have a responsibility that is booing the players productive. Is it actually going to help things? Is singling out individuals on the pitch going to make Chelsea a more unified place? No. Are we maybe being unrealistic in our expectations around the club? Do we actually know what we want from the current club? That in itself is a broader issue than just the current ownership. That is something we have felt at Chelsea, especially online, and I think this was massively increased during the pandemic, is a distance between what certain segments of Chelsea fans want, which makes it difficult, right? Because Chelsea is a massive club. It has a massive supporter base across the world. So to try and get consensus over things is a little bit more challenging. But at the same time, that transparency, I think, is important. And as I've said in relation to Mauricio Pochettino, I do think that if the ownership takes a stand and a position that, well, what am I supposed to do? I don't think that's leadership. I don't think that's taking responsibility. And I don't think that's fulfilling what you promised and said you were going to do when you took over the club in 2022.
So we've seen recently at the first of all, the Wolves defeat, and more recently at the Brentford draw, a lot of anti-ownership chants, a lot of anger and frustration towards the owners. And we feel that there's obviously a real disconnection between the stands and the boardroom, and that if supporters continue to feel like customers, it's just going to get really, really toxic And it's going to become toxic kind of regardless of what happens on the pitch, which I think is probably the most worrying thing. If you're winning, you would expect a positive reaction, but we feel, and what we're hearing is, regardless of what's happening on the pitch, regardless of how we're performing, it's going to continue to be negative. And so we're urging the club to listen, take heed, and actually take supporters on this journey of fan engagement.
And I think the longer the silence goes on, the easier it is for a perception of distance, for a perception of what the characters behind the ownership are like, and for those stories to be fed out, and for that distance to be built. It becomes a lot easier if a Todd Boehly comes out, and we've seen how Todd Boehly has communicated in the past. I don't think he's a bad communicator. If you express that over an interview, a video interview, not through the website, which I think sometimes is a little easier to do, not a statement that can seem a little bland, an actual interview where you are maybe challenged a little bit, where you speak about what's happened over the past year. I think it would go a long way if there was some sense of humility within the current ownership, that mistakes have been made. And mistakes being made is just something that is going to happen in football. They're going to make more mistakes. Every football club make mistakes, but it's the feeling that they have been so assured and continue to double down, bring a sense of confidence when at times it feels like it hasn't really been justified, based on the decisions that have been made, based on the errors that have happened, and based on the sheer expenditure that has potentially put the club in some financial risk. Communicate that. If you're honest with that, if you speak to fans and try and be honest in that capacity, I don't ever expect an owner to come out, get down on their knees and beg for forgiveness. That's not what we want to see. That's not going to be helpful, and probably would cause you more harm than good. But I think a little bit of humility could go a long way. And sure, some people will stick two fingers up because they have already made their minds up. But that's not a reason to not communicate, just because there will be a segment who won't believe you. I think the longer you leave it, the more radical side of Chelsea fans are going to do things that maybe some of us disagree with. But it's hard to argue that they have been listened to properly or heard out or been spoken to on a consistent basis. And that's going to grow that distance. That's going to grow that disconnect, and probably lead to more toxic atmospheres inside Stamford Bridge, which is what none of us want. So those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I would encourage you to join the CST. I think they do a brilliant job, and a lot of this I think has been built up over the season, and I don't think their letter, which I suggest I'll link down below, I think it gives you a very important sliding doors moment, I think, for the club at the moment. They can either stick their fingers in their ears, believe they're doing everything right, don't engage with fans who are trying to put out a branch to say, let's try and change tack, let's try and improve things, and then hopefully maybe something productive can come from that. If nothing productive comes from it and we continue down the same path, I don't think any of us should be surprised if things get worse. So those are my thoughts. As ever, comments below. Let me know yours.